Hello everyone and welcome to Mini Extravaganza 2023. I'm Director of Product Development Will Schick, and I have the distinct pleasure of not only getting to spend the next 90 minutes hobbying with you, but hobbying on something you've never even seen before. So this is the very first time, the reveal, the exciting unveiling of the Imperial Range Troopers for Star Wars Legion. That's right, a brand new unit that's going to be coming your way sometime next year. We're going to cover more about this unit in discussion during the Legion Roadmap panel. It's going to be happening first thing tomorrow on day 3 of Mini Extravaganza 2023. But the hobby can't be stopped, and we're going to be showing these guys a little bit early. And taking a look at the unit, I'm going to walk you through my process for painting them. We're going to be using 3 different types of painting technique. We're going to use an airbrush, we're going to use some oil washes, we're going to use some acrylics, and we're just going to kind of like walk through this process over the 90 minutes. I'm going to hopefully be able to show you start to finish how I tackle most of my hobby stuff these days, especially when it comes to painting units. This can be a very fast and great technique for everything. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in and get started with our airbrushing. So just to show you kind of the process, I've Zenith highlighted this guy. We're going to work on this guy with the airbrush. And then much like any classic cooking show, I have my other completed stages going on here. So we're going to move through that. But my first goal with this process is to lay down some good foundational base coats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the airbrush to build up some transitions. And then I'm going to use my oil washes to really define everything and create all this nice looking stuff and colors. And then once that's dry and we've kind of cleaned that off, I'm going to move in and I'm going to start finishing everything with my acrylics. So that's the 3-step process. It works very quickly, and you can do a lot of really cool techniques and different color styles and everything with it. Works great whether you want to use contrast style painting, whether you want to use traditional acrylic painting, all of that good stuff. You can do this without oil paints, but it's a little difficult. So because these range troopers have kind of 2 different tones of white on them, I'm going to be using ivory and bright ivory for the cloak and the cloth, and I'm going to be using bright neutral gray and titanium white for the armors. And we're going to pull everything together and make that all work. I think there's a dark ivory now that kind of exists. Maybe we'll use that too. So we'll start with that. So my airbrush is on. I'm going to go ahead. I will not, Tony. You can't tell me what to do. I'm in charge. I'm the captain now, sir. So we're just going to drop some of that in there. We're going to thin it out with our water. There it is. Boop, boop, boop. All right, and then I just need, we'll use you. You look really rough there, Mr. Brush. You're now our mixing brush. All right, these are the Imperial Range Troopers as seen in the Solo motion picture. I don't know why I said motion picture, but whatever. So again, my goal here is to just simply do the ivory colors. Oh, Tony's got to fix the camera. Did I move?
No, you're all right.
I feel like I moved.
It's a little off. We're going to make better.
Make better. That's all we do here. We just make things better. If it's bad, we'll fix it. And if you can be precise with the airbrush at this stage, it works great. If you're still learning the airbrush, I'm not perfect with it. A little bit overspray isn't going to kill you. It's not going to hurt anything. Things will kind of mix in together perfectly fine. Let's get this fur here. And one of the cool things about the airbrush, you can do this step with a brush, obviously, but one of the nice things about the airbrush is if you can put your layers on kind of nice and light, that Zenith Prime will do some of the work for you. It'll start to create your shadows and gradients and everything, and that's always nice. So we're done with that. You can see how fast this goes when you get to a whole unit, so I would do that for each character or miniature in the unit. I'm going to add my ivory now, so we're just kind of going to build up on our values. That's all we're doing here. So knock that out, mix that up. And then what I want to do is, I'm going to grab this because I don't have a little spray bot, but I want to, so I'm always going to check my airflow out of the pot, and then I'm also going to like shift through my colors because I'm not going to spend a lot of time like doing a lot of the cleaning here. So now we're just going to come in and I'm just going to try to like layer up those highlights. And one of the cool things about the airbrush is that, you know, hitting those highlights in a natural way and building up your colors is really easy because you can just simply point at a 45-degree angle, and as long as you use nice short controlled bursts, you're just going to hit those areas naturally anyway, and the parts that are in shadow are going to remain in shadow. The big thing with the airbrush, you know, overall, like to get those smooth transitions is don't lay heavy on the trigger. So unless you're priming or something, like don't go full blast. Just short controlled bursts with nice, good thinned out paint, and you're going to be able to fill up those color gradations really nice. Let's clear this out. And next we're going to go to our bright ivory. So moving on to our bright ivory. We're going to knock this in, add a little bit of water. And you can use airbrush thinner, you can use water. Use whatever thinning agent or medium you feel most comfortable with. There's all kinds of options. Any of them really work. A lot of folks out there like to use water, but all right. So now we're just going to lay in those extreme bright whites. Well, how about that? I don't do math, Tony. I don't know what difference in splitting means. All right. Oh, can you hear the air compressor? I always, whenever I watch painting videos and people are airbrushing, if I can't hear the air compressor, it disappoints me. I find it to be so soothing. The little consistent brr, brr, brr. All right. So with that done, we're going to move on to our armor color now. And for this, again, we're going to be using that bright neutral gray. Maybe I want to start with neutral gray. I'm going to start with neutral gray, actually. So just to kind of give myself a bit more of a contrast to build up from. Boop. I don't think anything called the Empire's Elite would be a core unit, but that's just, you know, that's just me talking out of school. For those postulating in the chat. Beautiful. And here, because I went to a really dark neutral gray, or to a dark neutral gray color, I want to be sure to like be pretty controlled with it. I don't want to completely erase all of my zenith highlighting. So I'm kind of just looking for like the deep shadows, the places where that darkness would be. Tony, let me know if I get off camera.
You're kind of riding the edge. If you go forward and to your left a little bit, and a little more forward if you can.
How about that?
That's it.
All right, you just keep telling me. I'm not on the gimbal, so. All right. Extra challenges here. I can't like stick my head in the way to see what I'm doing or anything. Hope that prescription's real good for that faraway sight. Okay, and then we want to do the little knee pads here. There we go. On this stage, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just kind of like laying in all these different colors and stuff. Okay, I'm going to really quickly. Do we not have a thing, Tony? That's all right.
What thing?
Something to expel the airbrush. It's fine. We're just going to use the cup. I do this all the time at home because I'm not safe. Whoop. Don't worry about it. I got this. Well, I could go in the garbage can. It's so far down there, though. It's so far down there. All right, we're going to go to our bright neutral gray now. And this is where we're going to do the buildup of our white. Hit this with some water. Mix it up. Check our tip really quick. Spell that out. Ooh, yeah, there you go. All right. How about that? Am I there?
Yep.
Great. I'm learning. You can be taught. Okay. Get right in there on those little like armor plates that are on the coat. One of the things, like when you're doing the airbrush and stuff, is that if you're thinning your airbrush paints enough, just like when you're painting with acrylics normally, sometimes your colors, when you initially apply them, will look really bright, and you'll be like, "Oh no, I've gone too heavy." But if you give it a moment to dry, it'll mute out, and the color will become less intense as it dries. So it's always best, to take it in layers and build it up over several different passes. And that's obviously how really good airbrushing folks get those amazing blends and create the kind of the style that we associate with things that we see online that are done with the airbrush, those nice airbrushy gradients and everything. And you can mimic those kind of gradients by using dry brushing. A lot of really great videos on like, it's not an airbrush, it's dry brushing. And as a huge proponent of dry brushing, I always love watching those. They make me very excited because I thoroughly love I don't actually know if the heavy weapon is white like their crazy blaster rifles are, but can't remember the actual number for the blasters. But we'll just hit it with gray. I'll probably make it black when I get to it. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in with titanium white, and we're just going to build it up. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. For those who are like, where's my new thing? Obviously, cooler heads in the chat mentioning that there is a huge roadmap tomorrow. Well, huge. There's a roadmap tomorrow that's the same as all the other roadmaps that we've done so far. So if you're curious about what's coming in the next several months and you want to see kind of where we're going with Legion, get an update on all the cool stuff we showed at Adepticon, see some new and exciting things, that panel is the place to be. It's going to be featuring Simone Elliott, Marco Segovia, Andrew Dursum, and I believe Will Pagugu is going to be moderating that one and leading kind of the discussion. I've seen what's in there, and I can say that it's very exciting. So I can't wait. And that'll be followed right up with Republic's Finest, which more than likely, given how many extravaganzas go, is also going to be something that's going to be right out of that panel. And should inspire a couple of squeeze from some people, I would imagine. In the words of one Grand Moff, it'll be a day long remembered. in, just in case I decide that I want this to be white. The rest of it, build that up. I'll just do one last little highlight pass here. And at this point, you know, you could finish it this way with the airbrush, obviously. Or you could go straight from the airbrush to acrylics, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do our oil washing next. But you see how quickly we were able to build up nice little gradients on this guy, different colors. We have everything kind of separated out. And so we're moving really quick and really efficiently here. And do some quick washing of the airbrush so that it doesn't get all gunky and gross. I guess I will get down here to this very, very low trash can like Tony told me to do. You're the worst, Tony. The worst! I'm just going to do a really quick clean here. I'll do a much more thorough clean later. But this is the start of the process. So you do this over all of your troopers. It would take, you know, for a whole batch of troopers, you're probably looking, if you're comfortable with the airbrush, around 30 to 40 minutes for the entire unit. So in the general scheme of things, compared to doing base coats with a normal brush or anything like that, you're talking about a much, much faster process. And one that's going to give you all of your foundational layers that's going to make this next step work beautifully. What are you doing, Tony? What are you doing? You're going to move the trash can up? You don't have to move the trash can up. They can't see me doing this. They don't have to see my shame. It's fine. It's totally fine. All right. I'm going to call that good. Normally I would really work it a bit more just to make sure I don't get any gunk in there, but I'm going to do a little trick where I'm going to throw some just plain water in and give it a few spurts. Then I'm going to put it down. I'll call that good. I get this really sweaty glove off. Gross. Okay, so here's where we wound up. You want to let this dry before you move to the next step. For the question of do I varnish before and or after the oil wash, I do not. And the reason that I don't is that the white spirits will not affect or pull off the acrylics. There's no chemical reaction there. So the acrylics are not going to be affected by the white spirits. Additionally, by not varnishing, you actually allow the paint at a microscopic level to interact in a way that works better. This means that you're going to get a different look and kind of a different finished product that I really like. I like the way that the two paint mediums interact when you don't seal them. So I don't, other people do. It's really personal choice and kind of what you're comfortable with. But the big thing is if you're not going to seal it, or just in general with airbrushing and like period, even if I was going to go to the next step, it takes longer for the airbrush paints to kind of set in than a normal acrylic because they're thinned. So if I was to dive right into doing the wash on this guy, you'd probably see the paint pull up a lot easier, and I'd have to be pretty careful. So with that in mind, I'm going to set this guy aside. And cooking style-wise, we're going to pull out the two that I did previously. So same idea, slightly different look because, of course, my paint mixes were a bit different. But really, it's going to give you the same exact approach. So, you know, it's the ivory here, it's the gray whites here, and we just kind of built up those looks right that way. So I'm going to set these guys down. We're going to move on to our oil washes now. So our oil wash step. With this, I'm going to be using an ivory black for the white armor. And then because the kind of the cloaks and the pants and stuff, the cloth have a bit of a yellow look in the photography, in kind of the reference images, I'm using a mix of yellow ochre and burnt sienna. And this is going to kind of form my overall washes, and they're going to be what's going to take us to the next stage. When using oil washes, obviously you're going to use white spirits or mineral spirits, depending on where you are in the world. Don't lick your brush. That's a big one. Tony, never lick your brush. Just remember that. I know you're a brush licker. Yeah, so don't do that. One of the really, like, as we're going to talk about, one of the really amazing things about oil washes versus acrylic washes is you have a lot of working time with them. You're going to go ahead and get to remove colors from a subtractive method as well, which gives you a lot of control over how things work, which is really great. And you can go straight from the oil wash step to just painting or finishing with oils. Did a little bit of that last night with the Fear and Dead Man work that we did, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to actually go through the whole process and finish with acrylics. So after laying out my colors, I'm going to very quickly grab some of my ochre, some of my brown, mix that up. I think that looks pretty good. I can put a little more ochre in there. Just kind of knock that in. Clean off that really quick. Grab my ivory black. I'm just going to move some of that in here. And then I'm going to grab my fancy pipette. Just right here. I'm going to grab my mineral spirits. Ooh, goodness. Violent. And kind of like how much do you thin everything and all of that. It really just comes down to like what you're trying to do here. So with the black, because I want the white to be predominant, right? I'm going to be pretty thin with it. With the yellow, ochre kind of color, I'm probably going to be a bit, I'm going to let that be a bit thicker. So I'm just going to grab some of this here, put it in here, and then you can test your wash on the palette so you can kind of see how it's behaving. That's not too bad. I think that'll work really well for our white because we just kind of want to add a little shadow and shade to it. When it comes to the brown, we're going to grab some of this. And we're going to mix them in over here. I like doing this two well system, so like as I move my brush back and forth, I'm obviously taking some of the spirits into this one as well. So I'm kind of thinning two different versions. My really thin one over here and my thicker one over here. And that lets me play with the two without having to like continually mess with this or add more and more oil paint to it. It's just what I do. It's probably not like the best way to do it, but I personally think that it works well. So if you want to try it that way, you can. If you think that I'm crazy and it just doesn't make any sense, that's fine too. All right, so we have this kind of like tested up. A really quick look. Right there. All right, so we're just going to start layering this color in, and this is going to go over all of our ivory. And then we're going to be pretty careful, and we're going to layer in. Where are you going, Tony? All right, you do whatever you got to do. And then we're going to layer in that black. Now, obviously, you know, to no surprise of anyone, these colors may run together if you're not careful. So that's okay. You can play around it. You can blend it out if you want to. But it is something to be aware of, right? So like you're going to get a little bit of mixing. It's not the end of the world. It's absolutely fine. If you don't want that, you're just going to have to take, you know, more time, be more careful. You can do this in stages. So for example, you know, if you have a decent amount of time or you really don't feel like you can do the two colors at once, you could lay in this color, wash, finish it all up, let it dry for like a day, come back and do the black next. And that would totally work. It is a perfectly good option. For me, like that kind of slows down the speed, but you can do it. Again, it just depends on what your hobby time looks like. But you do need to finish. You need to finish one of the oil washing steps in one session. So just kind of like make sure that that you're paying attention to that, and it'll be perfectly fine. So I'm gonna put that guy down really quick. We're going to hit this one, and then I'm going to go back to that fur, and on the fur I'm going to actually use my thicker wash because I want that to really settle into those cracks and crevices on the fur and give us a bit more texture look. So going to layer this in. Knock that out. Looks like my glue didn't quite set right there, but that's okay. We'll fix that later. And then we'll pop this together. Come over here. This right here. That right there. That. All right. I think I got it all. Close enough anyway. I'm going to go into my thicker wash. So this one has less mineral spirits, more oil paint. I'm just going to hit all this fur. I want this to be nice and dark in the crevices and more stained and everything. So again, this is kind of why I really like that two-well system, because if I'm doing different textured areas where I want a different body to the wash, you know, I want a different staining effect, or I want more paint versus less spirits or things like that, I've kind of already done that work right away, and I have it both available to me for the whole time that I'm working on the unit. So I can really go back and forth and mess with stuff. Or let's say that there's an area where I'm like, I don't think that the light wash is working quite as well. I can grab some of my heavier stuff, go in and just blend those two things together. So for like example, like maybe this cloth here, I'm like, the light stuff isn't quite doing it. I can just come in and knock in the heavier stuff as well. And it works perfectly well and easy. Or I could come in under here and do that. So you have a lot of control basically over how all this works. And as with all oils, the oil washes are going to they can be completely removed if you spend enough time and effort wiping them off. That's not going to be our goal here. We're going to remove quite a bit of them. But if you make a huge mistake or you do something that you just really, really hate, unlike with an acrylic wash, where this would be a disaster and we'd have to start from square one again, because there's no coming back from this with an acrylic wash. This is just what it is. So build up your layers and figure it out. With our oil paints here, we're going to be able to just take those right off. So I'm going to clean that off really quick. We're going to come in here to our ivory black, and we're just going to knock this all over the white areas. Get in there. So this is just going to go anywhere where we have our white armor. And like I said, you know, these two washes will run together. They will mix. That's what oil paints are kind of designed to do, is to blend on the canvas itself. So if you don't want that, then be aware of it. The other thing to really consider at this stage is the level of stain and color you want. So when I was doing kind of my testing on this, I did wind up using some of my new fancy artist grade black, my Mars black, on the white, and it stained it so hard that I actually tossed one of them out. I was just like, it's too dark. I am going to have to like kind of do a lot of work to reclaim the white. So be aware of that, right? Like one of the big things about oil washing and stuff in general is that you have a lot of control based on how long you let it sit, how much white spirits you use. The grade of oil will also have a huge impact because it's the amount of pigment that's in them. So artist grade paints, which are, you know, kind of the big standard, have a lot of pigment. They stain really, really well. They're very heavy bodied. So you get more dramatic effects with them. For most oil wash like techniques and stuff, for what you do on miniatures, 9 times out of 10, the mid-grade kind of level of oil paints will work really, really well. And the nice part about that is they're a bit more affordable. And of course, you get so much oil paint from a miniatures player perspective that they'll last you for forever. So it just depends on, it depends on what you're using the oil paint for and the effect that you want. But you can really you can really play with how it all turns out, and the overall look that you're going to achieve. But when you're doing whites, you know, white is obviously a very stainable color, so you don't need a lot to kind of get in there and really affect what you're looking at. Yeah, the roadmap's going to be really, really cool. They're always very fun to do. I'm excited to be able to watch one and just hang out in the chat and engage and sharing the excitement rather than, you know, kind of in the moment. It is really fun to be on those panels and get to talk about all of the work that we do on this stuff and engage and discuss. But you do have an itinerary, and especially if you're moderating or you're kind of like leading the discussion, you have to be very aware of the time and how you got to move to the next thing. So you don't get to really revel in the chat or see firsthand, you know, the squeals of joy and the excitement and everything else. So I'm looking forward to being able to share that with everyone in the Legion community tomorrow. All right. So here is kind of where we wound up. You can see on this guy, I added a little bit more of the black to the wash. So this gives you a pretty good idea of how that paint can really affect your staining. Now, obviously, we're not going to leave them this way. We're going to go in and we're going to clean these guys up and remove that. But before we get there, I'm just going to show you like where we're going, because I need to let these guys set for a bit so that oil wash has some time to set up and the paints can do some staining. So we're going to cheat. We're going to go a little bit ahead. We're going to dive over here and we're going to show you where we're going. So this is going to be our final result. When we come back through and we clean off all those colors, Tony, let me know if I'm like on camera in this. More to my right. How about there? Okay. So we're going to go from this to this. And the way we're going to do that is with good old makeup sponges and Q-tips. And we're just going to subtractively remove that oil wash until we're happy with it. So you can see here, most of my black wash is gone, but I have this nice little shading and shadowing effect. My white looks a bit more natural. My cloth has this nice little stain to it that has that bit of yellow to it. Everything's looking really nice and sharp. And at this stage, the big next step is to just finish it with acrylics. So we're going to pull out our colors. We're going to add our spot highlights, our lights, everything else. We're going to do our eye sockets and all that good stuff. And we're just going to wrap it up. And you kind of move this process over the course of an entire unit. You can see how quick this process can be to get you to a point where you have a really great tabletop looking unit right away. So we're going to go there with it. I'm going to circumvent the process a little bit, and we're just going to dive into the cleaning step because I have two that are already ready to go. So I'm going to show you how we're going to approach cleaning or removing this oil wash, kind of subtractively painting it to get us to the point we want. So I'm going to start with the handy dandy makeup sponge. It's good to have a bunch of different options here. I'm going to slap on another glove. You don't need one, but at this point I'm kind of tired of having my hands covered in oil paint and then touching my face and then having everybody laugh at me in the office. They're very rude. Rude! So I'm going to take my makeup sponge, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to very carefully, because I don't want my colors to mix, right? Just work on one area and then the next. What's happening, Tony?
Adjustments.
Okay. And the ideal amount of time to kind of let your oil washes sit typically is about 15 to 30 minutes. So we probably had these guys, let's generously say we were maybe close to 10. So we're cleaning them about 10 minutes too early, in my opinion, right? So just keep that in mind as well. you want to give the oil wash time to set in. You want to give that mineral spirit time to evaporate and for the paint to actually do its work on the mini itself. But I just want to demonstrate, again, kind of cooking show style, how this gets approached, how it gets worked on. One thing to consider is that as you work with your sponge as well, it's going to pick up more and more paint. So you can utilize this to your advantage by simply, let's say you want the top of the mini to be the brightest because that's where the sun is, and you want the bottom to obviously be the most in shadow. You can utilize a similar stroke style to pull, example, down, because the further down the miniature you go, the more paint's going to be on your sponge, which means that you're going to leave more paint residue at the bottom, which will make it look darker because that's where all your shadows are. So this can be a really great and effective way to quickly shade and highlight your minis as well. And I just can't say enough good things about the oil wash technique. There's a ton of resources online and folks that utilize these techniques in incredible ways for miniatures painting. It's really phenomenal to watch and to learn. Adding another tool to your toolbox is really great. And if you've ever, really struggled with acrylic washing and shading techniques and just been like, there's got to be a better way. Well, there is. And oil paints are that better way. It's a little bit of a learning curve to figure out, quite how they work and how to apply them properly. But they are very forgiving, and it doesn't take long to really get into the groove. And they allow for some really amazing final results. Like, I super love how all of the things that I've been painting with this kind of like mixed media technique have turned out. The oils give them this kind of realistic grit, grime, like there's just something about the way oil paints dry and their natural finish, and then combined with the acrylics, it pops for me. I really like it, and it allows me to do really great looking paint jobs pretty quick. What was taking me 6 or 7 hours is now taking 3 or 4 hours, and that's a huge time savings when you got a lot of stuff to do. So that's how everything kind of works with that. I'm going to shift over on my sponge. And we're going to move into this color now. So start pulling this. Again, I kind of want to be as careful as possible not to get any of the black on this, if I can. Ooh, yeah, that guy didn't glue. Have to fix that. But it does kind of showcase the genius of our engineers here, with how they've really kind of come in and they can hide those required build lines by utilizing natural cloth seams and stuff, so that you spend less time having to fill in little part gaps and everything. Let's go to this guy over here. And then I'll commit the cardinal sin that everyone yelled at me for yesterday, but it's just how the process works. And we'll shift over to using some Q-tips. Some cotton swabs, I guess would be the more appropriate term, because I don't actually know if these are Q-tips or not. To finish out our cleaning here. And again, remember, the more you work an area, the cleaner it's going to get. So you can pull up a lot, you can pull up a little. It all comes down to kind of the effect that you want here and what you're looking to achieve. So I'm going to shift over. I'm going to find that. Oh, where did I put it, Tony? Where did I put it? There it is, my little pipette. Grab some white spirits. Now, you only use white spirits when you completely want to, like when you want to 98% erase an area, right? So if you really want to like clean those highlights or anything like that, that's when you want to go into those white spirits, because they're going to pull all that oil right off. Because we didn't really always need so much stuff. So for example, on these helmets, right, I want these to be really white. So I can just come in, hit it with the white spirit, and you'll see how it just kind of pulls up all of that oil wash, and we get back to pretty much where we started with the white. And so this is just the process where it's like, again, painting by subtraction is really a great way to kind of put it. And you're just going to pull those colors down until you reach the level that you want. And this process across an entire unit usually takes around, 30 minutes or so, depending on your colors and like where you want to go with it, how much you want to work it, all that stuff. But it can go pretty quick, especially if you do smart work with your undercoats and pick your oil wash shadows, smartly. Like I said, if you hit your white armor that you want to be white with too powerful of a black wash, you're going to be spending a lot of time cleaning it, and that's probably not what you want. So be aware of that. The other thing to note is that as the oil wash dries, just like as acrylics dry, the overall like tone and look is going to change. So sometimes it's better to leave it a little heavier than you think it's going to be, because as it dries and as that mineral spirit kind of goes away, just like we talked about with the airbrush, it's going to mellow down. You're going to lose a bit of that punch from it. The beautiful thing about the oils, though, is that let's say you take my advice, you leave it, you let it dry for an hour or two or whatever, and you're like, I don't like it, it doesn't look good. Or you let it dry for a day or 2 days, whatever. You leave for a week, and then you come back and you're like, oh, this is terrible. That shit guy, he's the worst. A little bit of mineral spirits on your Q-tip or your makeup sponge, start wiping, and that oil will react to that mineral spirit, and you'll be able to pull it back up. So, you've got the ability to come back and correct mistakes or fix things or pull more of it up, all that stuff, for quite a bit of time. And that's one of the cool things about oils in general and the way in which they work and all of that stuff. But really, because of how little oil paint is on this and how much mineral spirits we're using for these washes, they're going to be effectively dry for, they're going to be dry much, much sooner than, say, your classic like oil canvas painting that's using just a ton of paint on the canvas, right? Like layers and gloopy layers of oil paint. And so that's why those take months to dry. These, with the amount of oil paints that we're using here, they're not going to take months to dry. Not at all. I don't wanna. It's comfortable there, Tony. Leave it alone. Okay. So I think we've kind of like done everything we need to show here. Work it until you're happy with it. Pull those colors, get everything ready to go. Then set them aside to dry out for 30 minutes or an hour, and you can actually dive right back in with your acrylics, or you can let them go for, I think these ones have set up for 2 days now. 3 days. What day is it? Friday, Tuesday, 3 days. So at this point, the oil wash is super, super dry. And very, very paint overable with no problems. Again, I did not seal this. You don't need to seal it. You can. Some people will tell you that you should. The people that do this technique that I've really kind of like gravitated towards say that you don't, and in my experience with everything that I've done with it, I don't think you do, and I like it better when you don't. So we're going to grab our colors again. We're just going to go in and we're going to finish these fellers up. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some titanium white, and we're going to do some really quick titanium white highlights. Whoop. And you know what? We might put a little bit of our bright neutral gray in there too. Just a tone. That titanium white is real bright. So I'm just going to mix in a little bit of that because I don't want to go too crazy here. And from there, am I?
A little more to your right. Yeah, that's good.
All right. And we're just gonna start hitting in wherever we want our highlights to be. And these can be as strong or as little as you want. Just do that. Hitting those. We can two brush this as well, which I do like to do from time to time. And this is where you can clean up any of those, like any place where, say, your two oil washes kind of overlapped each other in ways that you don't like. I find that even when they overlap each other, though, it kind of looks pretty good because, like, especially with the brown and the black, you get a little bit of a dirty look, so it can look dingy, like used. Oh, Tony's coming back in. I just can't make you happy, can I?
It's just that focus drifts.
Well, I'm not going to move as much anymore, Tony, I promise. We're done with the craziness. We're back to like the normal painting here. Come in here.
You do you, I'll keep up.
Will you? Ooh, I like this challenge. Are you ready, Tony? I'm going to be as difficult as possible now. You don't know how much I move when I paint in my, like, the comfort of my own home. I'm a monster. Sometimes I paint with a headstand. Just paint upside down, new perspective. That's not true. It's a lie. But I wanted to make Tony sweat. He didn't blink, though. It didn't even phase him. You're cool as a cucumber. And I mean, overall, right, this step right here, just think of it like the last 20% of when you're painting with acrylics. But, you know, we've sped up the base coat, shadow, even some of the first highlights. We're really at, for a tabletop miniature standard, we're really at the very last stage, which is just those extreme highlights, the things that are going to make this miniature pop and look really nice. So we can take those obviously as high as we want. We could just be done at this point. Like, honestly, a couple of details that are missing here, like some of the lights and a couple of the other things. And we could easily call this unit good to go, right? It's personal preference, it's miniature destination, it's how far you want to take it. And that's another thing that I really like about this technique, is that it's very flexible and takes you all over the place when it comes to everything. And you don't have to use acrylics for this step. You could go right in and use more oils if you wanted to, and that has its own benefits, obviously, if you do it. But I find, having done both, I just feel more comfortable and more confident finishing everything with the acrylics. So that's how I do it. And I don't have reference in front of me. I don't remember which there's a very specific way in which this blaster rifle, oh man, it's got a specific designation, but certain parts of it are like spot black, and I don't remember which spots, so we're just going to make ours pure white, and you'll have to bear with me. That's just how it's going to work. And then I want to come back here. I'll get this little piece of armor back here white. Finish that. Maybe grab a little bit more of this. Mix in a bit more highlight. Should be doing this in a wet palette, but I don't have time to set one up, so it's okay. Those highlights a bit more. All right. Come down here. Put that in. Put these in. That. That. A little bit of that. And doing quick edge highlighting on those Magno Grav boots. The Magno, I think they're Magno boots. Whatever. They probably have a fancy name that I'm forgetting. Everything has a fancy designation in Star Wars. Usually it's Z6 something. My goodness, the amount of Z6 things it's nonsense. Okay. And all right, good. It's a Dallas Kemp. Oh, look, Tony threw up a reference for me. Now I know where the buttons go. Beautiful. All right. And we're going to do the same on this guy. So we're just going to come in and knock this out. That same reference you could find on the internet too, Tony. But I appreciate you. Now we know where those black areas are on that blaster rifle. Gonna knock in these highlights on the white, and then we're gonna move to the cloak, the coat, and the pants and everything. So, you know, again, like white is always defined by its highlights. So the more extreme you go with the highlights, you don't need a lot, and you need very little. Actually, you need very, very little pure white to trick the eye into seeing white. But like black is defined by its highlights, whites is defined by its shadows. So just the barest hint of pure white on those raised edges, and the eye will perceive white. And this is part of what makes, I think, oil washing especially so good for painting white, is that you can start, you know, with your naturally gradated or even just a flat white. And the way the oil kind of works with the paint and it settles into those different raised and lower areas, it creates a really, really natural looking surface that has some texture to it, and it mimics a lot of what takes a heck of amount of work to do with just basic acrylics in moments. And you have so much control over it because you can, like we kind of showed, right? you can subtract as much or as little of the wash as you want, and how much you do that will obviously affect the final overall result. So I have not painted anything white in a long, long time that hasn't used this process. Ever since I discovered it, I was like, my gosh, this is, for me, this is the holy grail of the white struggle. How hard it was to paint white, how difficult it was to get my whites to look natural and good. And by changing that color of that wash, you can do all different versions of white. Adding in a bit more green, a bit more purple, a bit more blue. You know, you can get all these different feels, all these different chromatic whites, and it just works, and it's very easy to go in and finish up and clean. And there's something about those oils, just the way they look, that I really, really like. It's this it's this really nice just overall finish to it. Okay, we're going to go to our bright ivory. And I think I'm going to take a little bit, let's see if I can find it. Not olive flesh, that'd be weird. CAD key. What's this one? Pale yellow. Sure. I'm going to grab a little bit of pale yellow. Just because that yellow ochre obviously added quite a bit of warmth to that ivory, which has a little bit of warmth, but not a ton. So what I want to do is, just like I did with the bright neutral gray and the titanium white, I want to make sure that my highlight here makes sense and isn't so stark that I feel like I have to go back in and glaze it. Tony, am I still on camera? Let me know. I'm moved, so. Okay, so let's add in a little bit more of this. I think that's. Okay, a little bit of water. Throw that in. That's why. Swap our brush here. There we go. Okay. And again, you know, same thing that we did before. We're just going to kind of come in and we're going to give little scritches and depth. So more of like extreme highlight texture a bit to it. Clean that up. If you're hanging out, enjoying the look at these new range troopers for Legion, I assume you're going to be back here in 30 minutes for our Legion discussion on battle forces, because that's going to be quite the moment. We're going to have Andrew Dursum, Will Pagani, and myself. We're just going to be hanging out, kind of talking about some of the key design philosophies and development philosophies behind the battle forces. Do a little bit of a retrospective and review since they first launched and released. And maybe I have a surprise or two in store for some folks. But some of my favorite things to do during Mini Stravaganza are those kind of more philosophical discussions about development design. Hopefully give people a bit of an exclusive inside look at how we approach our thought process in everything, what we're looking for, what we're hoping for, where we think we kind of hit the nail on the head, where we totally missed the nail, those kinds of things, what we've learned for me, always the most important question, the most interesting thing is like, what did you learn? What did the process teach you? And that's part of why I love the hobby and painting so much, is that it's just all about learning, you know? Every single miniature, every single paint job, every assembly, it teaches you a lesson in some way. It teaches you something you didn't know before. And then once you have that, you get to go in and apply it to the next time and see how it changes things. I think that's really cool. Maybe not too weird for a person who thought they were destined to teach, that I like lessons. But watching your skills and your knowledge develop and expand, nothing better. Our brains are pretty hardwired to enjoy that. Feeling smart, feeling good. We hate failure, but when you learn from it, it's not actually a failure. I think it looks pretty good. Let's move on to this next guy. Well, bam! I can't read that. It would be great to see something. What does it say, Tony?
See a side-by-side of the various minis used in the stream at the end.
Oh, all right. We'll show how all the steps went together, and we'll see if Tony can get them all in. But we can do that. We can do it. Yes, we can. I'm just going to come in again. I'm just going to kind of like do in our little highlights here. When it comes to cloth, especially on like cloaks and stuff, I'm just looking to add texture, right? So little scritches, maybe hitting the bigger folds, like with some highlights and stuff. But it's not so much an edge highlight here. It's more about how do you kind of give the eye the little spot highlights, those little like stretches of fabric, those little visual entrance points, those high highlights that if you get really zoomed in and close on look not very good, because you can see kind of the roughness of the brush strokes, you can see how everything's going on. But from that tabletop view, they provide that overall interest and texture that makes it feel clothy, that makes it feel voluminous, like it has form and shape. And if you ever have the chance to see some of the studio miniatures in person, if you get really close to them, you'll see that that's a technique that gets used a lot. They still look gorgeous up close, but the closer you get, kind of similar to like an old school comic book, right? And the closer you get to the image, the more you can see the different layers and techniques that make up the whole. And so I think one of the best things that you can do when you're working on a project is take a minute or two or 5 minutes, like take that coffee break, come back, let your eyes readjust, let your eyes zoom out, and then take a look from that 1 foot, 2 foot away like view, because the overall like effect of your paint job in the miniature is going to change dramatically. When you're focused on every single tiny brush stroke, you see every single tiny brush stroke. But when you pull out and you take a look at it, that whole, all of a sudden every little tiny brush stroke like changes completely. And it's a huge trick to not get tunnel vision. I often hear a lot of people describe it as tunnel vision, right? That tunnel vision can really ruin you. Let's do some of my favorite little dry brushing here on the cloth, really, or on the fur really quick. Boop, boop, boop. Boop, boop. Just a really light kind of dry brush, catch those top edges. Give that visual interest that goes with the fur. Come over there and do that. This guy's fur really quick. Probably technically more of an overbrush than I'm doing here because I'm not really using proper dry brush etiquette, but get the same effect for the most part if you're just really gentle with your strokes. Kind of 2 hairs and some air at Bob Ross style here. But that hair, that fur texture on their collars is so deeply sculpted that this, even a gentle kind of pass, really pops it in and lets it catch really well. So, okay, and now, I'm very happy with where all this is. We need to find, nope, black brown, sure, why not? Nope, maybe it's over here. Dark warm gray, bronze to douse. There we go. Find our black really quick. And then we need to do our visors. Come on, come out. That's one way to do it. Cool, we're gonna finish. We're gonna finish, Tony. We got like so little left to do. Maybe if that little bottle hadn't been clogged though, that'd have been nice. Oh well. Oh well. Am I on?
Yep, you're good.
Great. So we're just gonna come in with this. Neat that out a little bit. They have the red visors. Okay, that's fine. We're gonna hit that with the black. Oh, that's kind of weird. And these little weapons are strange. None of this makes sense. It's okay. We're just gonna kind of make it up really quick. That's not entirely right to the reference, but it gives us that little pop of black steel that's in there. What about your belt? No, no, no. So really we're looking at like some red dots and call it good. Well, it's a shame that I wasted so much black paint with that little spill. Do that. Back here, do that, do that. Get a little bit of separation line in there. Just to help make it stand out. And then go to red. Yeah, sure. We'll just go all the way to bold. Bold P-Rite red. And we gotta hit these little buttons here. Red. We have this little weird thing over here. It's the red. And it looks like we got a little, oh, we can't even see that. No problem there. And I think there's like some lights on their boots as well, but that's not it. That's not it. All right, well, we'll just call that good. I'm happy with that. And this boy, you can't even see any of that stuff. Perfect. Okay, and let's do this little strap here. Come in. Kind of pull it back down to gray. Grab a little bit of this. Oh dear. There we go. So I just want to really quickly take these straps on the modify here. They're just slightly different color. So I'm just going to quickly knock them out into a different color. I didn't really mess with the fur along the cloak, but we can do that really quick. So we can just kind of like come in. Again, using that really light touch overbrush. Finish that out. I just need to do the visors really quick, and we'll be done in plenty of time to show off our finished results here. So again, just looking for that quick tabletop standard, right? You could spend way more time going in there, doing some dark lining, doing some extra highlights and all that, but you don't really have to do that for a full unit. And extrapolate, 90 minutes, we were able to walk through the whole stage. So I think once you get comfortable with the technique, not counting drying time and everything, where you can go drink a coffee or check your emails or hop on your phone for a little app fun, you can easily knock out an entire unit in 3 to 4 hours here. And that just means that you have more time to do other stuff in terms of playing, getting more of your units painted, all that good stuff. Blah. Great. Okay, let's just come in and do these visors really quick. Ooh. Had some red on my fingies. Oh man, a lot of red on my finger. Where'd that even come from? That's the worst. All right. Boom, we're gonna call that good. All right, let's see, Tony, can you see this here? All right, so left to right, start to finish. So the dry brush, the oil wash, the clean, and the finish. So I can't spin all of them at the same time. It's too hard. I don't have enough hands. I don't have enough hands. So there you go. So you can see at each stage how dramatically different it gets. But each stage was very, very simple, right? Airbrush your layers, do your oil wash, finish off with all of your highlights. And you can wind up in a very, very short time from nothing to a very good looking miniature. And again, I love the oil washes. If I wanted to, and I was crazy, I could even say, you know what? I want to pull up some more definition on this guy. I want the belt to be a bit more solid. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my oil wash again because I'm done with my acrylics. And I'm going to create another like really thin pin wash because I got time. I think I still have like 10 minutes here. Let's go nuts. So I'm going to pull up this, create this nice, super thin oil pin wash. Am I on?
Yep, your shoulder is too.
Oh, God. Stupid shoulder. I just touch and touch and touch and touch. And all you have to do is touch. And the capillary action of the oils will actually run throughout all of those cracks and crevices. So let's just say you want to reclaim some of those like little spots. You can just touch, boop, watch how you can, hopefully you can see on the camera how that works because it's one of my favorite parts. Just the pin wash, like it's just a touch and a touch and it just goes all the way through those cracks and crevices, no painting required. And again, if you mess up, you get something somewhere you don't want, you just go back in with your little Q-tip or your makeup sponge, a little white spirit, and you clean it right up. So you can very quickly, let's say, you know, this gun, this blaster needs some extra definition, right? So that line needs some extra definition. The difference between the cape or the coat and the armor panels needs that extra line. So this would be my final step here, is I just go back through with my oil wash or my pin wash, and I define all of my lines. Maybe I want the seam lines to be stronger. Maybe I want to get in here and, oh, it's so good, Tony. I just love watching it. Like, you're just like, boop, and then it does the whole thing for you. Like, you literally do nothing. It's so great. I love it.
It really is a mini painting magic bullet.
I know. I love it. It feels so good. Like, when you get it right and it just goes woo all the way down. Man, it's great. It's great. Just look at it. Look at it run. Yeah, that capillary action on the oil and the pin wash, like, it works so well. And you can go back in and maybe you want a little bit more definition in your fur. So you just touch. Maybe you want to get those in. Get those a little darker. So this can be your finishing step, right? And you can get all of those nice little fine lines like worked in and everything else. You can go get your different sections all lined out. Dark lining, we talk about contrast being one of the most important things. Defining areas with dark lining is super important. Dark lining is a pain in the butt when you do it with acrylics because you got to be really careful and steady. But pin washes, when you can use them, kind of solve everything. And you can do a similar approach with acrylics, but it's a lot harder to control and get the viscosity right, and they don't flow quite as well. So something to keep in mind. But pin washing is a great way to finish off everything with your dark lines. Give that definition. And it just adds that last little bit of finish and visual interest to everything. And it's perfect and lovely, and we love all of it and everything else. All right. And I can even come in and use it to help out this red that we didn't do a lot with. So if I just tap. Tap over here, and this I made a little bit thicker and harsher. And then just grab myself one of these and go boop, 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 boop. And I can clean it right back up. Just gonna do a little bit on that belt. Oh, yeah, there we go. Boom. Boomer. And there's the extra little bit of finish on there. So, again, you can take this as far as little as you want, but that process will take you a whole like 10, 15 minutes for a whole unit. It goes super fast, and it really amps up the overall look and finish of the miniature. So dark lining, don't avoid it. Definitely use it. It's fantastic. And super, super easy to do with your oil washes. Okay, with that, we are wrapped up and finished. Thank you so much for joining me at this exclusive look at the newest Empire unit. It's going to be coming your way next year, the Range Troopers. You can tune in tomorrow for all of the preview roadmap action for Star Wars Legion. It's going to be kicking things off for day 3 of Mini Extravaganza at 9 a.m. Pacific. Otherwise, stick with us. We're going to be talking Battle Forces here in about 10 minutes. So if you want to learn more about Legion Battle Forces, what to expect, what we think, what's going on with them, get the design insights and philosophy behind them, tune in next. See you in a moment. Goodbye.